Aquaponics is copying nature, and it's much more complicated than people think. Hydroponics is generally a lot more simple. It's been studied for many more years, and in hydroponics one uses inorganic nutrient solutions in your water with plants. Those plants have access to the nutrient that you've put in there, and then they grow and produce fruit which are often tasteless and last for a long time on the shelf or in the fridge, and are very, very high in chemical content. So chemical nutrients are used to produce fruit and food in hydroponic systems. Generally quite simple to do, and one of the problems about hydroponics is that once you've run a hydroponic system, plants require a certain supply of specific nutrients, and when the water that they're in runs out of those nutrients, they no longer take up any more nutrient. They reject the nutrients that they don't want. And the result is that your water concentration of undesirable nutrients in hydroponics cycles upwards. So that requires that in hydroponics, one has to dump water that has been supplied to plants. You have to dump it back in the environment somewhere. And that has negative connotations because it implies that you are harming the environment. You're putting a toxin, essentially, back into the environment. And most hydroponic systems, large commercial hydroponic systems, all require an environmental impact assessment, an EIA. And that often is an expensive process, but it also means that we have to comply with those regulations. And the water can't just be dumped, it has to be treated. In aquaponics, we do it a little bit differently. We try and copy natural systems, much like you would the Okavango swamps or the river delta where it's running water and water is running through plants. So we use processes that are established in nature, but that are highly complex and that we need to understand thoroughly in order to break down and produce the nutrient that plants need. All we're doing is we study that very carefully, and we go right down to the level of using electron microscopes to identify which microbes are responsible for phosphate production and which microbes are responsible for nitrogen production. And then we create conditions that allow those microbes to exist in an aquaponics system, and then we grow plants from the byproducts of those microbes. Now in a hydroponic system, if you want nutrient, let's say you want your plants to flower, you would use a nutrient mix that is high in phosphates and potassium, take it out of a bag, put it in there, tomorrow your fruits will start fruiting and flowering. But in an aquaponic system, it's very much more complex because you've got to understand which biology is responsible for producing phosphates and potassium and calcium and magnesium and boron and molybdenum. It's much more complicated. We recirculate our water, so we use very little energy to do that. Most of our modules are using between 200 and 300 watts of power to run the entire system, which is less than a light bulb, you know. And the technology that we use to enable us to do that means that we can put growing systems right into townships, where previously you had to have a farm. You can now grow food that is high quality right at home, which in the past was never really possible.
We do have tropical fish that were given to us by some friends in Kariba. They're called guppies, and they are living in the deep water culture beds, which are those long beds. And their job is to keep the bloodworm larvae down, to eat mosquitoes, and to eat off any of the excess algae and stuff that will naturally be prevalent in bodies of water. We've had to learn how to grow worms and try to start to harvest it's called their castings, so it's their feces, which is very high. It's called black gold. It's very high in nutrients, yes. And so we make our organic composts out of the worm castings, and we pour that directly into the media beds, which is again the 3/4 stone. And incidentally, Zim has a very high, excellent aggregate of 3/4 stone. With the fast-growing veggies such as the fancy lettuces, the triple ply lettuces, the fancy red, butter lettuces, I've had 3 reapings. So that's 1 reaping per month. With the longer ones such as the green pepper, you got our first green pepper ever. That, you know, as you can see, we're at 85 days and those green peppers are starting to get ready now. But with the faster growing things, we haven't been able to keep up with basil. I have given tons of basil away because it just grows and grows and goes so fast. So I think I've done probably about 4 reapings of basil. It's just wonderful being in our own vegetable garden. It's beautiful, it's therapeutic in there. The sound of running water the whole time is just good. And some of the more challenging parts have just been the chemistry, the biology, and some of even the physics, because there's no moving parts. It's based on physics in principle. So running water, bulb siphons, flood and drain, all of that sort of things.